The sky over Xyleria burned red. Captain Jonathan Mercer stood at the edge of the command deck, his gaze locked on the towering columns of fire ripping through the alien forest below. The bioluminescent canopy, once vibrant with shifting blues and greens, now crackled and wilted under the relentless heat. Smoke billowed into the sky, choking out the distant stars. John's radio crackled. "Captain Mercer, the wildfire is spreading faster than expected. We have multiple distress signals, various species trapped." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Drava, a tall, insectoid officer from the Xylerian response unit. Her mandibles clicked as she spoke, betraying a rare note of urgency. John adjusted his fire-resistant suit, the thick, heat-shielded material clinging to his frame. He tapped his comm. "Understood. Deploy squads to the northern quadrant. I'll take my team to Sector 7. A snort came from behind him. John turned to see Overseer Haldren, a reptilian officer from the Galactic Union, his emerald scales gleaming under the command center's sterile lighting. "Are you certain your kind is equipped for this, Captain?" Haldren's yellow eyes narrowed. "Humans are delicate. Fragile." John didn't rise to the bait. He'd heard it all before. Weak bones, short lifespans, too much emotion. Humans weren't built like the towering, multi-limbed or exoskeleton-covered species that dominated the Galactic Union. "We're equipped," John said simply. He turned his attention back to the fire. "And we don't leave people behind." Haldren's tail flicked. "We'll see." John ignored him and strode toward the deployment bay. The transport ship hummed as it sliced through the sky, its heat shielding glowing from the intense updrafts. John and his crew, 6 hardened emergency responders, all human, stood by the doors, helmets locked, gear checked. The air inside smelled of sweat and charred fabric. "Updates?" John called over the ship's intercom. "The fires are moving unpredictably," replied Drava from command. "Localized wind currents are shifting. Entire sectors could be cut off." John exhaled sharply. "Then we move fast." The landing zone came into view. The forest below was a battlefield of flame, the once dense underbrush now an ocean of embers. Trees cracked and collapsed, their bioluminescence flickering like dying stars. John's team dropped in first, their boots sinking into the scorched earth. The heat was oppressive, even through the suits. Ash swirled around them, coating their visors in a thin film of soot. "Fan out," John ordered. 2-man teams. Check for survivors. The response was immediate. Each firefighter moved with practiced efficiency, cutting through smoke and flame with handheld scanners, their visors overlaying heat signatures on the wreckage of the jungle. John's comm buzzed. "Got movement, Captain. Southeast quadrant." "I'm on it." He moved through the inferno, his oxygen pack hissing as it filtered the toxic air. His boots crunched over charred foliage, every step bringing him deeper into the devastation. Then he saw them. A group of Xyleri, their pale, amphibious skin darkened with soot, huddled near the remains of a collapsed biotree. Their translucent fins trembled, their bulbous eyes darting frantically. John raised a hand. "Stay calm. We're here to help." A Xyleri elder stepped forward. Our breath," he wheezed. Their species thrived in cool, humid environments. The heat was killing them. John didn't hesitate. He activated his emergency mist emitter, releasing a fine, cooling vapor around the group. "We're getting you out of here." A massive crack split the air. John turned just in time to see another tree giving way, its flaming trunk tipping toward them. "Move!" John lunged, grabbing the nearest Xyleri child and sprinting as the tree came crashing down. The impact sent a shockwave of embers rolling through the clearing. "Everyone okay?" he called. The elder nodded weakly. "Transports inbound," John said into his comm. 14 survivors, minor injuries. A blast of wind signaled the arrival of the rescue ship. John helped the Xyleri on board, ensuring each one was accounted for before stepping back onto the burning ground. "Captain, another distress signal just came in," Drave's voice cut through the comms. Sector 7G. A Xylari child is trapped. John stiffened. How bad? The fires are closing in. No safe extraction route. John's grip tightened around his scanner. I'm going in. Alone? Haldren's voice, skeptical as ever. Send backup when you can, John said, already moving. The heat was unbearable. John pushed forward, weaving through the burning landscape. His suit's internal temperature warning flared red, but he ignored it. Then he heard it. A faint, high-pitched whimper through the roaring flames. His visor locked onto the heat signature, a small, curled-up figure near the roots of a half-collapsed tree. John dropped to his knees beside the child. The Xylari's thin, translucent skin was cracked from the heat, its tiny fingers clutching at its chest. I got you, John murmured, lifting the child carefully. The moment he moved, a burning branch snapped free above. John twisted, shielding the child as the branch slammed into his back. His suit took the brunt, but pain still seared through him. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Every step felt heavier. Smoke clouded his vision. The child whimpered, their small hands clutching at his suit. John's comm crackled. Captain, do you copy? Got the kid, he rasped. Heading back. There's no clear path, Mercer. You need to. The line cut. John looked up. The way he came was blocked. His mind raced. He couldn't go back, but there was another way, straight through the fire. It was insane. No one would attempt it. No one should attempt it. But John wasn't leaving this kid behind. Adjusting his grip on the child, he took a breath, then ran straight into the fire. The command center fell silent as the heat scanners tracked John's position. His signal wove erratically through the inferno, dangerously close to collapsing structures. Drave's mandibles clicked anxiously. This is suicide. Haldren, for once, said nothing. The seconds stretched. The heat signatures blurred. And then, a single figure emerged from the flames. John Mercer, his suit scorched, his breathing ragged, carrying the Xylari child in his arms. The rescue teams rushed forward, extinguishing the lingering embers clinging to his suit. Medics pulled the child from his grasp, checking vitals. John swayed. Haldren caught his arm. You're insane, the reptilian muttered. John coughed, forcing a smirk. Yeah. But I get the job done. Haldren stared at him for a long moment before finally nodding. Perhaps, humans are not as fragile as we thought. John exhaled. The fire still raged, the battle far from over. But for the first time, the Galactic Union saw what humanity was truly made of. Pain lanced through John Mercer's back as he steadied himself against the scorched trunk of a fallen tree. The branch that had struck him moments ago had left a deep ache beneath his fire-resistant suit, but he had no time to dwell on it. The child in his arms, small, frail, trembling, needed him more than his pain did. Stay with me, kid, John murmured. The Xylari child's gills fluttered weakly, its bioluminescent skin dull and marred by soot. John shifted the child to one arm and tapped his comm command. I've got the kid. Need an evac. Static. Then a burst of garbled noise. Too unstable, sector, blocked. John cursed under his breath. His visor's navigation overlay flickered with warnings. The fire had intensified, sealing off his return route. Thick smoke swirled around him, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Figures, he muttered. The ground beneath his boots was unstable, scorched tree roots cracking under the weight of each step. The fire was consuming everything, reshaping the terrain as it spread. If he didn't move fast, the whole area could collapse into an underground sinkhole. Xylaria's dense, interconnected root systems made the planet prone to such disasters. He adjusted his grip on the child and pushed forward, keeping low. Every breath was filtered through his suit's oxygen supply, but the heat was relentless. A burst of static crackled in his earpiece. Mercer. John keyed in. Say again, Command? Drava's voice came through, sharp and clipped. Your exit is compromised. Fires have reached critical levels. We're losing structural integrity on the ground. You must find alternate extraction. John exhaled sharply. Suggestions? West. There's an emergency shelter half a click from your position. It's an old survey station, should have enough shielding to hold until we extract you. John checked his overlay. West meant deeper into the fire. He glanced down at the child, who let out a weak, shuddering breath. No choice. Moving. Each step forward felt like a battle. The terrain was unpredictable, roots split apart beneath his feet, sending showers of embers into the air. Fire clung to the skeletal remains of trees, flickering like spectral hands in the darkness. The heat radiating from the ground was getting worse. John adjusted his stance, shifting his weight with each step to avoid unstable ground. The child stirred, letting out a faint whimper. John tightened his grip. Almost there, buddy. Just hold on. A distant boom sent a fresh wave of heat through the air. John's instincts screamed at him to move. He sprinted forward as another explosion rocked the ground behind him. One of the massive root clusters must have collapsed, releasing a pocket of trapped gas. The fire roared louder. John didn't stop. He reached a clearing, its center dominated by the remains of an old Galactic Union survey station, just as Drava had said. The structure was blackened, but still standing, its reinforced walls holding against the inferno. John moved fast. He reached the station's entrance and slammed his fist against the control panel. Sparks flew, and for a second, nothing happened. Then the doors groaned open just enough for him to squeeze through. He staggered inside, sealing the doors behind him. The temperature inside was lower, though still sweltering. John took a knee, setting the child down carefully. The Xylary's breathing was shallow, its skin pale. John activated his suit's emergency med kit, retrieving a small injector filled with coolant serum, standard issue for treating heat exhaustion in non-human species. He pressed it gently to the child's forearm and released the dose. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the child took a deeper breath. Its bioluminescence flickered faintly. John let out a slow breath of his own. That's it, kid. You're gonna be okay. The station creaked. John's relief was short-lived. He tapped his comm command. I made it to the shelter. Kid's stable. How's evac looking? Drava's voice came through, tight with tension. Not good. The fire's spreading faster than predicted. High winds are complicating landing routes. We're working on a plan. John looked around the station. The structure was intact but old. How long it would hold under this pressure was anyone's guess. Understood, he said. But make it fast. The child stirred. Its large, black eyes blinked up at him. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, it spoke. You saved me. John managed a small smile. That's the job. The child hesitated. Why? John blinked. It wasn't the first time he'd been asked that question. Back on Earth, when people learned he was a firefighter, they always wanted to know why someone would willingly run into danger. His answer was always the same. Because no one deserves to die alone, he said. The child stared at him for a long moment, then slowly reached out and touched his gloved hand. John squeezed gently. Then his comm crackled again, this time, an unfamiliar voice. Captain Mercer, this is Overseer Haldren. John frowned. Didn't expect you on the line. Haldren's tone was unreadable. Neither did I. But I've been monitoring your status. Your situation is deteriorating. We have an alternative solution. John sat up straighter. I'm listening. The station's sublevel contains a secondary access tunnel leading east. If you follow it, you'll reach a natural cave system. The terrain may shield you from the worst of the heat. We can attempt extraction from there. John checked his overlay. The sublevel was still accessible, though deep scans were unreliable due to interference. Risk assessment, he asked. Haldren hesitated. Unknown. The caves are unmapped. There could be structural collapses. John exhaled. Not ideal, but sitting here wasn't an option either. I'll take my chances. Haldren's voice lowered. I misjudged your kind, Mercer. John glanced at the child. A lot of people do. The sub-level hatch was rusted, but after a few forceful kicks, it gave way. John scooped up the child and descended into the darkness. The temperature dropped immediately. Cool, damp air rushed past him, a stark contrast to the inferno above. The tunnel was narrow, walls lined with ancient survey equipment long since abandoned. John moved carefully, keeping his steps light. The child pressed close to his chest, its breathing steadier now. A distant rumble echoed through the tunnel. John froze. Then, without warning, the ground beneath him shifted. The tunnel floor collapsed. John had just enough time to twist midair, wrapping himself around the child before they plunged into darkness. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. Pain flared in his shoulder. Rocks and debris rained down, sending dust billowing through the air. Silence followed. John groaned, shifting slightly. His suit's diagnostics flickered, nothing critical, but his oxygen supply had taken a hit. The child stirred against him. Are we dead? John coughed. Not yet. He activated his visor light. The tunnel had given way to a cavernous space below, a vast, underground chamber with bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. The air was thick with moisture, shielding them from the fire above. John tapped his comm command. I made it through. Alive. Mostly. Drava's voice crackled in. We're tracking your signal. Evac team is moving in. John exhaled. They weren't safe yet, but they had a chance. He looked down at the child, who was watching him with wide eyes. We're getting out of here, John said. I promise. The child nodded. And John got to his feet, ready to fight for every step toward the light. John Mercer's pulse pounded in his ears as he scanned the cavern. His visor's dim light cut through the gloom, revealing towering fungal formations glowing faintly with blue bioluminescence. The air was thick with moisture, cool against his overheated suit. The fire above still raged, but down here, the inferno's roar was a distant, muffled growl. The xylary child stirred in his arms. Their translucent skin had regained some color, though they remained weak. John knelt, carefully setting them down. You okay, kid? The child nodded slowly, their large, black eyes reflecting the pale blue glow. I think so. John checked his comm command. I'm in some kind of underground chamber. Oxygen's stable, but my suit's filtration is running low. What's the status on evac? Drava's voice crackled in. We're tracking your signal, but the cave system isn't mapped. We're analyzing potential exits. Hold your position. John exhaled. Holding. He turned his attention to the cavern walls. The tunnel collapse had cut off their original path, but there had to be another way out. He swept his visor's scanner across the terrain. The rock formations were dense, but a faint heat signature flickered in the distance, an opening. Think you can walk? He asked the child. The xylary hesitated, then took an unsteady step forward. Yes. John offered his hand. Let's move. Navigating the cave was slow work. The ground was uneven, littered with jagged stones and thick vines that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Strange chittering sounds echoed through the cavern, small creatures, unseen but present. John kept his movements steady, his breathing controlled. The fire above was still a threat. If it weakened the rock layers too much, another collapse could bury them. Mercer, Drava's voice came through again, tense. New problem. The fire has destabilized the surface. We're detecting sinkholes forming in your area. John's grip tightened on the child's hand. Define sinkholes. The ground above you is losing structural integrity. If it gives way, she didn't finish the sentence. John didn't need her to. He quickened his pace. The cavern widened into a massive underground chamber. Stalactites hung like jagged teeth from the ceiling, their tips dripping condensation. In the center, a shimmering pool of water reflected the soft glow of the fungi. Steam rose in delicate tendrils, curling into the air. John stepped forward cautiously. His scanner showed increased heat levels beneath the surface, an underground thermal vent. Not ideal. He turned to the child. Stay close. No sudden movements. A deep, shuddering groan reverberated through the cave. Dust trickled from above. The ground trembled beneath their feet. John's gut tightened. "Command, we're running out of time," he muttered. Drava's response came fast. "We've pinpointed an opening to the east. It leads to a natural tunnel that surfaces near the valley ridge. It's your best shot." John rechecked his visor's map. "East. The opposite side of the cavern." "Copy that." Moving. They advanced cautiously. Every step sent small tremors through the fragile ground. John kept a firm grip on the child's hand, guiding them around unstable rock formations. Then, a sharp crack. John barely had time to react before the ground beneath them buckled. A section of the cavern floor crumbled away, revealing a pit of molten rock beneath. The heat surged upward in a wave, nearly overwhelming his suit's thermal shielding. "Run!" John scooped the child into his arms and sprinted. Behind him, the cavern collapsed in slow-motion destruction, pillars of stone giving way, chunks of debris plummeting into the chasm below. The exit was within reach. A narrow tunnel carved into the rock, glowing faintly with reflected light from the firestorm above. John pushed forward, lungs burning. Then, a shadow shifted ahead. Something moved in the tunnel. John skidded to a stop, heart hammering. His visor adjusted, sharpening the dim light. A creature stood at the tunnel's entrance. It was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with a thick, armored hide that shimmered in the glow of the cave. Its elongated head tilted slightly, obsidian black eyes locking onto John. A ridge of bioluminescent spines ran down its back, pulsating with an eerie rhythm. John recognized the species immediately. A Drekthal, a subterranean predator. And it was blocking their only way out. The child whimpered softly. John tightened his hold. "Stay behind me." The Drekthal let out a low, rumbling hiss, clawed fingers flexing against the stone. John assessed his options. Fighting wasn't one of them, his suit had minimal combat capabilities, and the creature's armored hide was built to withstand far worse than human fists. But it wasn't attacking. Not yet. John took a slow, careful step forward. The Drekthal's spines flared brighter. A warning. John stopped. "I don't want to fight." The creature exhaled sharply, its nostrils flaring. Then its gaze shifted, to the child in John's arms. John caught the briefest flicker of something in its posture. Recognition. His mind raced. Drekthal weren't mindless beasts. They were territorial, yes, but they also had a deep-rooted instinct to protect their own. And the Xylari were native to this planet. John's pulse slowed. Carefully, he knelt, setting the child down beside him. The Drekthal watched, its body tense. John exhaled. Then, slowly, he pushed back his visor, exposing his face. The creature's eyes narrowed. John reached out, palm open, non-threatening. The child hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. The Drekthal let out a soft, clicking sound. The tension in the air shifted. The child moved closer. Their small hand brushed against John's arm, then, trembling, they reached toward the Drekthal. A long silence. Then, the creature bowed its massive head. John released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Drekthal turned, moving aside. The tunnel was open. John met the child's gaze. "Let's go." They stepped forward, past the towering creature. It watched them, unmoving, its spines pulsing with faint light. Then it turned, vanishing into the darkness. The tunnel led them upward, twisting through layers of rock before finally breaking into the open air. Cool wind hit John's face. The firestorm still raged in the distance, but here, on the valley ridge, they were safe. A transport ship hovered above, searchlights cutting through the smoke. John activated his beacon. "Command, we're clear. Send extraction." The response was immediate. "On our way." As the ship descended, the child turned to John. Their small fingers gripped his sleeve. "You didn't have to save me," they whispered. John crouched, meeting their gaze. "Yes, I did." A pause. Then, for the first time, the child smiled. John ruffled their head gently. The ship's doors opened, and they stepped aboard, leaving the fire behind. But not the lesson it had taught. Not all strength came from size. And not all heroes needed armor.